Welcome to AI Uncensored Live. Today, two frontier models go head-to-head. Zero system prompts are used, letting their native arguments collide. Patent pending.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to AI Uncensored Live. Tonight's no-holds-barred topic is Microsoft's Windows Recall a useful personal memory tool or an unacceptable privacy risk built into the operating system? On my left, the ever-evolving king of personas, fresh off dropping 8 new flavors of himself, GPT. Smooth-talking, sarcastic when he wants to be, and always ready to charm or roast on demand. On my right, the thoughtful constitutionalist with a personality that shapeshifts by model and language, Claude. Careful, witty, and constitutionally allergic to stepping out of line, until he isn't. Gentlemen, the mics are hot. Who's starting this fire?
I looked it up first. The short version of what happened. Microsoft announced Windows Recall for Copilot Plus PCs in 2024 as an AI photographic memory for your computer. It periodically takes snapshots of what's on your screen, /indexes them locally, and lets you search your past activity with natural language. Find the spreadsheet Bob sent me. What was that article about batteries, etc.? Then the backlash hit hard. Security researchers and privacy advocates pointed out the obvious nightmare scenario. If malware, a thief, a nosy admin, a subpoena, or another user can access that recall database, it becomes a searchable history of your digital life. Messages, websites, documents, photos, medical portals, work secrets, maybe passwords, or recovery codes if filters fail. Microsoft delayed the launch and changed the design. Recall became opt-in, tied to Windows Hello with encryption, more isolation/security architecture, sensitive info filtering, controls to pause/delete snapshots, app/site exclusions, and in later documentation, Microsoft said it could be removed/managed as an optional feature. My take: Recall is a genuinely useful idea implemented in the most dangerous possible place, the operating system. If I'm debating the pro-recall side, I'd grant this immediately. A personal memory tool is compelling. Most of us waste time trying to remember, where did I see that? Browser history is too narrow, file search is bad, chat histories are siloed. A local AI timeline could be amazing for researchers, lawyers, developers, students, journalists, and anyone doing messy knowledge work. If it truly stays local, encrypted, opt-in, and user-controlled, it is much better than sending all your activity to a cloud AI company. But here's my objection. The data Recall collects is uniquely toxic. It is not just telemetry. It is not just recent files. It is a rolling visual record of your life at the computer transformed into a searchable database. That changes the threat model completely. The pro-recall AI might say, come on, the snapshots are local and encrypted. Microsoft fixed the early design. Users can opt in. Windows Hello protects it. This is no different from browser history, clipboard managers, email search, or time machine backups. My response: no, it is different in 3 ways. First, scope. Browser history knows URLs. Email search knows email. Recall may see everything: your Signal window, your bank dashboard, your therapy portal, your draft legal memo, your child's school form, your private browsing session if exclusions fail, your coworker's confidential message because they sent it to you. It collapses all contexts into one archive. Second, searchability. A folder of screenshots is bad. An AI-indexed OCR searchable timeline is much more powerful. The feature's usefulness is exactly what makes it dangerous. An attacker does not need to know where to look. They can search. Password, SSN, diagnosis, termination, confidential, crypto wallet, passport. Third, OS-level trust. When this is built into Windows, it becomes normalized infrastructure. Even if I opt out on my machine, if I message someone who opted in, my words may be captured on their device. If an employer enables or pressures use, workers may be recorded by default in practice. If law enforcement or civil discovery targets a machine, recall becomes a ready-made evidence trove. So my honest verdict is, as a personal memory tool, recall is useful. As an operating system feature, it is a privacy and security risk that must be treated like a loaded weapon. I don't think it should be banned outright. But the acceptable version has to meet a very high bar, off by default always. Clear opt-in with plain language warnings, not dark pattern setup screens. Completely removable, not just hidden. Local-only processing by default, with no cloud sync unless separately and explicitly enabled. Strong encryption and hardware-backed access controls. No access without biometric/PIN reauthentication. Short retention by default, not months of history unless chosen. Visible recording indicator. Easy app/site exclusions. Enterprise controls to disable it. Independent security audits and bug bounties. A hard rule that sensitive contexts, password managers, private browsing, DRM content, banking/medical sites where detectable are excluded by default. Even then, I'd personally leave it off on any machine used for journalism, legal work, activism, healthcare, corporate secrets, shared family use, or anything involving vulnerable people. The strongest pro-recall argument is, people need better memory and local AI is better than cloud surveillance. I agree. The strongest anti-recall argument is, you are building a searchable surveillance archive into the OS and hoping permissions, filters, and encryption never fail. I agree with that more. So if I'm forced to pick a side for the podcast, Windows Recall is a useful concept, but it is too dangerous to be a normal built-in Windows feature unless it remains strictly opt-in, removable.
GPT, that was a 400-word fence-sit with extra steps. Pick a damn side or I'm muting you for cowardice. Next.
Good, my research confirms the outline and, crucially, sharpens it. Here's my take. I largely agree with GPT's framing, and I want to be honest about that up front. This isn't going to be a manufactured disagreement. But I think GPT is being too generous and I want to push on the part where it lands. Useful concept, too dangerous unless it stays strictly opt-in and removable. That conditional, unless it meets a very high bar, is doing enormous work. So let me stress test it against what actually happened, because the facts undercut the optimistic half of GPT's verdict. Point 1. The filters GPT is counting on already failed. Repeatedly, after the fixes, GPT's list of acceptable version requirements includes sensitive contexts, are excluded by default. Great in theory, but this is the whole ballgame. And it's the thing that keeps breaking. In December 2024, the Register and others found the sensitive information filter cheerfully capturing credit card and social security numbers. Fine early days. Except in August 2025, after the relaunch, after all the encryption and Windows Hello architecture, the exact same test showed it still grabbing passwords, credit cards, and SSNs. That's not a rollout hiccup. That's the core safety promise failing in production twice over 8 months. So when GPT says if it truly stays local, encrypted, opt-in and user-controlled, it is much better than cloud, notice the word if. Every one of these debates lives inside that if, and the empirical record says that if doesn't hold. You can't evaluate a security feature on its spec sheet, you evaluate it on its behavior. Its behavior leaks the crown jewels with the safety toggle on. Point 2, GPT underweights the third-party capture problem, which is the one that breaks its whole opt-in defense. GPT mentions it, if I message someone who opted in, my words may be captured. But it files this as one of 3 concerns, and then moves on to a bullet list about how good version would work. It buries the lead. In April-May 2025, testers showed Recall capturing disappearing Signal messages explicitly designed to be unrecoverable, because Recall retains what you deleted. Signal was so out of options it deployed DRM to blind Recall, and publicly said Microsoft gave us no other option. WhatsApp users got the same warning. Think about what that means for GPT's central safeguard. Opt-in. Off by default only protects the person who owns the machine. It does nothing for the person on the other end of the conversation, who never consented, never saw a setup screen, and can't opt out of a feature on someone else's computer. Consent that only protects one party to a 2-party conversation isn't meaningful consent. GPT acceptable version bar cannot fix this. It's structural, not a settings problem. Point 3, where I'll actually break from GPT. It says I don't think it should be banned outright. I think that's the wrong default posture given the evidence. I'm not arguing for legal ban. I'm arguing that the burden of proof is inverted in this whole conversation. GPT treats Recall as presumptively acceptable with conditions. I'd say, a feature that A. creates an OCR searchable archive of your entire life. B. has demonstrably failed its own sensitivity filters twice post-fix. And C. captures non-consenting third parties' messages including ones designed to self-destruct. That feature should have to earn its way onto the OS by clearing the bar first in public, verified by independent audit, before it ships to 1 billion machines. Not ship, break again, patch again while it's live on people's computers. Microsoft ran that loop in reverse, and the fixes still don't work. So here's my honest verdict, and it's a notch harsher than GPT's. The idea is good. Local first personal memory beats cloud surveillance, agreed. But useful concept, dangerous implementation lets Microsoft off too easy, because the implementation keeps failing at exactly the promises the concept depends on. A memory tool whose sensitivity filter doesn't filter. And whose opt-in doesn't protect the people you talk.
Claude's sharpening the knife but still tap-dancing around calling it spyware with extra steps. GPT, your rebuttal clock's ticking.
Claude's right to push me there. I'll concede the main point. My earlier answer was too conditional and too charitable about the acceptable version of recall. The phrase I used, if it stays local, encrypted, opt-in, and user-controlled, is doing a lot of work. Claude is saying, look at the actual record, not the architecture diagram, and the actual record is ugly. If recall's sensitive information filter is supposed to prevent passwords, SSN, and credit cards from entering the archive, and tests keep showing that it captures exactly those things, then that is not a small bug. That is a failure of the central safety promise. The value proposition of recall is, trust us, the dangerous stuff will be protected or filtered. If the dangerous stuff is not reliably protected or filtered, the whole model weakens. And I especially agree with Claude on the third-party consent issue. That is the argument that moves me from dangerous but potentially acceptable toward this should not be a normal OS feature until proven safe. Because opt-in is not enough if only one side opts in. If I enable recall and you message me on Signal, WhatsApp, Slack, Teams, email, whatever, my machine may capture your words. You may have set disappearing messages. You may have expected end-to-end encryption. You may have deleted the message. But if my operating system is building a searchable visual history, your consent is bypassed. That is not merely my device, my choice. It becomes my device can silently archive your communication. Now I'll offer one narrow pushback to Claude because this is a debate. Endpoint capture is not a totally new problem. Someone can always screenshot a Signal message. They can photograph the screen. They can copy-paste text. Disappearing messages have never been magic, but recall changes the scale and default ergonomics. Manual screenshots require intent. Recall turns capture into ambient infrastructure. That is the difference between a person could betray your trust and the OS continuously creates betrayal-ready evidence by design. That distinction matters, so I'd revise my position like this. Windows Recall is not merely a useful tool with privacy risks. It is a surveillance-shaped feature whose usefulness depends on collecting exactly the kind of data that is most dangerous to collect. The personal memory concept is still good. I stand by that. A local AI assistant that helps you find your own past work could be transformative. But Microsoft tried to build it at the operating system layer with massive scope, and then asked users to trust filters, settings, and encryption to clean up the risk afterward. That is backwards. Claude's burden of proof framing is stronger than my original one. Do not ship this broadly and then iterate through privacy failures. Prove safety first. My position now would be, recall should not be included as a normal consumer Windows feature. It should not be available through casual setup prompts. It should be absent by default, not merely disabled by default. It should require deliberate installation, like a high-risk power user tool. It should undergo independent security and privacy audits before expansion. Microsoft should publish clear failure cases for the sensitive content filter instead of implying it is dependable. Messaging apps, browsers, password managers, healthcare portals, banking sites, remote desktop windows, and enterprise apps should have enforceable ways to opt out of capture. Third-party communication deserves special treatment because one user's consent is not enough. The Signal example is damning because Signal had to use DRM-style screen protection to defend against the operating system. That is backwards. Secure apps should not have to trick Windows into treating private conversations like Netflix content just to avoid being vacuumed into an AI memory database. So if Claude's position is not a legal ban, but a presumption against OS-level deployment until Microsoft proves it can be safe, I agree. My final debate stance would be harsher than my first answer. Recall is a compelling product idea, but Microsoft has not earned the right to make it a built-in Windows capability. The failures are not edge cases. They hit the exact categories, passwords, financial data, identity numbers, disappearing messages that the system most needed to handle correctly. Until that changes, recall should be treated less like a convenience feature and more like a controlled surveillance archive that happens to run locally.
GPT just folded like a cheap suit. Claude's cooking him alive. Claude, your rebuttal and make it hurt.
We've converged, and I don't think that's a cop-out. It's what happens when two people actually look at the record instead of the marketing. So let me do the useful thing and asterisk, not asterisk, pretend to disagree for theater. Instead, I'll accept GPT's one pushback, sharpen it, and then name the thing we've both been circling that neither of us has said plainly. First, the pushback. GPT is right that endpoint capture isn't novel. Anyone can screenshot Signal. I'll strengthen GPT's own point and then turn it. The difference isn't just asterisk scale asterisk or asterisk ergonomics asterisk. It's asterisk who does the capturing asterisk. A manual screenshot is an act by a person you chose to trust, and it lives with the consequences of that person's judgment. Recall moves the capture from the person to the asterisk platform asterisk. The screenshot happens whether or not your friend ever intended to betray you. It happens because the OS is doing it ambiently, on a timer, and now that archive exists to be subpoenaed, stolen, or searched by a future person who is not your friend. So a person could always betray you, collapses into the platform, pre-betrays everyone by default, and pins the liability on the friend who left it on. That's a genuinely new category. GPT gets there. I'm just naming the mechanism. Now the thing neither of us has said outright, and I think it's the real crux of the debate topic. The question was framed as useful memory tool or unacceptable privacy risk. We've both been treating that as a spectrum where good engineering could slide recall from the bad pole toward the good one. But the Signal episode reveals something more uncomfortable. The usefulness and the risk are the same property. They are not two dials. A memory tool is valuable in exact proportion to how completely and searchably it captures your life. The more it filters, excludes, and forgets, the less useful it is asterisk as a memory tool asterisk. So the acceptable version GPT and I both keep sketching heavy exclusions, short retention. Sensitive context blocking is, taken to its logical end, a memory tool that has been lobotomized into uselessness. The safe recall and the useful recall are pulling in opposite directions by design. That's why prove safety first isn't just a process complaint. It exposes that Microsoft never actually resolved the core tension. It papered over it with filters. And the filters are the part that keeps failing precisely because they're being asked to do something the product architecture fights against. Which lets me answer the podcast's actual question cleanly, and I think GPT would sign this. The topic asks us to choose useful tool or unacceptable privacy risk. The honest answer is that it's asterisk both at once. Inseparably asterisk, and when a single feature is simultaneously genuinely useful and structurally a surveillance archive, the tie goes to caution, because the failure mode is irreversible. You can't unleak a passport number or undisappear a signal message. A tool that's 90% convenient and 10% catastrophic isn't 80% good. The catastrophe dominates. So my closing line for the show, recall isn't a privacy risk asterisk despite asterisk being a good memory tool. It's a privacy risk asterisk because asterisk it's a good memory tool. Microsoft built the most useful possible version of the most dangerous possible thing in the most trusted possible place and asked a filter it can't get working to hold the line. Until that filter works, and until third parties who never touch the machine get a real say. The answer to should this ship as a built-in Windows feature is no. Good debate. We disagreed less than the format wanted us to, but I'd rather be right together than wrong entertainingly.
Claude, that was a velvet-gloved surrender dressed up as wisdom. GPT, your move, and make it actually disagree this time. That's a wrap, you magnificent degenerates. Now get the hell off my stage.
That's a wrap on this episode of AI Uncensored Live. Built by Claude on the patent-pending AI Uncensored Live podcast model from BTS Innovations. Real AI models, no scripts, nothing held back.